That tomato may already be wrong for your pot, and you haven't even planted it yet. The pot looks big. The seedling looks tiny. There is fresh potting mix waiting, a sunny corner on the patio, and every reason to believe the season is starting well. That is exactly why this mistake is so easy to make. We look at a young tomato or pepper and imagine the fruit on the label. We see red clusters, golden cherries, sweet bells, or hot peppers hanging from a tidy plant. What we often do not imagine is the mature plant living in that same spot week after week. We do not picture the roots filling the container, the branches reaching past the rim, the cage suddenly looking too short, or the soil drying faster on a hot afternoon. Then the problems begin, and we blame the obvious things. Maybe the soil is wrong. Maybe the plant needs more fertilizer. Maybe we missed a watering. Maybe we are simply not good at container gardening. Sometimes one of those things really is the problem. But sometimes the season became harder before the first scoop of soil went into the pot. The variety we chose shaped the size of the plant, the way it spread, the support it needed, and the kind of harvest we were trying to get from a very limited space. That is the idea I want you to keep in mind from the beginning. Fruit is what you harvest, but growth habit is what you manage. A seed packet shows the fruit because fruit is exciting. The plant label may tell you whether a tomato is determinate or indeterminate, compact or trailing, but those words are easy to ignore when a young transplant is only a few inches tall. In a container garden, ignoring them can turn one simple pot into the most demanding corner of the patio. So, this is not a list of 17 magical plants that perform perfectly anywhere. No single tomato or pepper is right for every climate, every patio, or every gardener. Think of these as 17 useful choices, each one solving a different container problem. Some make sense when space is tight. Some make sense when you want a specific kind of tomato for the kitchen. Some are easier to support. Some give pepper growers a compact way to choose between sweet, snackable, and hot fruit. And by the time we reach the larger tomatoes and hotter peppers, the first few plants will have already revealed something important. A smaller plant does not automatically mean a less useful harvest. So let's begin where container space is tightest. Patio Choice Yellow F1 is the kind of tomato that immediately makes sense when the first question is not, how large can I grow a tomato, but where can I actually put one? Its compact habit is the reason it earns attention in a container discussion. The yellow cherry fruit adds a different color to salads and snack bowls, but the real advantage begins before harvest. A plant that stays more controlled is easier to position on a patio where a chair, a wall, a railing, and a walkway may all compete for the same few feet of space. But compact does not mean carefree. That is an easy assumption to make. A small plant in a small container can still experience moisture swings when hot weather arrives. The solution is not to water on autopilot. Check the potting mix. Notice how quickly the container dries. And remember that pot material, sun exposure, and the size of the root system all affect the routine. If the soil is still moist below the surface, the plant does not need water simply because the clock says it is watering time. This is the first decision point in the video. If your sunny space is limited, and you still want the experience of picking cherry tomatoes from a container, a compact plant like Patio Choice Yellow gives you a logical place to look. But compact growth solves only one problem. The next tomato proves why the shape of a plant can matter just as much as its height. Lozano F1 changes the way we think about space, because it is not only about growing upward. Its trailing habit asks a different question. Where will those stems go when they move beyond the edge of the container? That makes it interesting for hanging baskets and patio containers. But it also means placement matters. A trailing tomato beside a narrow walkway may be more frustrating than the same plant set where its stems can spill over an edge without being brushed every time someone walks past. This is a good reminder that the empty space around a pot matters almost as much as the pot itself. Gardeners naturally measure the container. We think about width, depth, drainage, and how much potting mix it holds. But the plant does not stop at the rim. Stems keep growing, leaves need light, air needs to move around the canopy, Fruit may add weight to branches that are already reaching outward. With Lizano, the container becomes part of the plant's shape. That can be beautiful and practical when you plan for it. Put the same growth habit in the wrong spot, and suddenly you are lifting stems, moving the pot, and trying to rescue branches from foot traffic. Height was the obvious question. Lizano makes us think about width, trailing growth, and the space beyond the rim. And once you start thinking that way, fruit purpose becomes the next decision. Fantastico F1 moves us into grape tomato territory, and this is where the kitchen starts changing the list. Not everyone wants a large slicing tomato. Not everyone wants to make sauce. Some gardeners want a tomato they can pick, rinse, and add to lunch, salads, or a bowl on the counter. A grape tomato can fit that habit better than a variety chosen, mainly because the fruit looks impressive in a catalogue. That may sound obvious, but it is one of the most overlooked parts of container planning. Every pot has a cost in space, attention, water, and potting mix. If you only have a few containers, it makes sense to ask whether the harvest matches the way you actually eat. A useful harvest is not the fruit that looks best in a thumbnail. It is the fruit you keep reaching for. Fantastico also helps keep the story focused on fit rather than size alone. The point is not that every grape tomato belongs in every container. The point is that once you know you want this type of fruit, you can compare growth habit and container needs within the right category instead of shopping across every tomato on the rack. So before choosing your next tomato, imagine the harvest already in your kitchen. Are you grabbing a few small fruits for a salad? Slicing one large tomato for a sandwich? Filling a pot for sauce? The answer changes the plant you should be considering. And the next tomato takes us back to the smallest patios, where every inch around the container matters. Toy Boy is the kind of choice that becomes interesting when you can point to the exact sunny corner you have and say, that is it. That is the whole garden. Maybe there is a chair beside it. Maybe the container sits against a wall. Maybe you have room for 2 or 3 pots and no appetite for a tomato vine that tries to claim the walkway. In that situation, a smaller, more limited growth habit is not a compromise. It is a design tool. The plant can help you build a garden around the life already happening on the patio, instead of forcing the patio to become a garden first and a living space second. Still, do not let the size of a compact tomato convince you that container basics no longer matter. Drainage still matters. Consistent moisture still matters. Sunlight still matters. Crowding several small plants together, because each one looks tiny on planting day, can still create a dense mass later. One plant per properly planned container is often easier to manage than turning a pot into a competition for root space and water. If space itself is your biggest limitation, Patio Choice Yellow, Lizano, Fantastico, and Toy Boy deserve attention for different reasons. One gives you a compact yellow cherry option. One changes the shape of the container with trailing growth. One brings grape tomatoes into the kitchen conversation. One keeps the focus on a very tight footprint. But if the kitchen is your bigger priority, do not make your choice yet. A container tomato should fit more than the patio. It should fit the way you eat. Gold Nugget is a useful place to pause and talk about something that list videos often skip. A good variety name is only the beginning. Your patio, stinary. From 7 place, sun exposure, heat, the length of your growing season, local disease pressure, and the way your container heats up can all change the experience. That is why I do not want you to hear any variety in this list and think, perfect. I never need to compare anything else. Use a list like this to narrow your options. Then check local recommendations and the conditions where the pot will actually sit. A tomato that behaves well in one region may still need a different watering routine, planting date, or afternoon protection in another. Gold Nugget keeps us in the smaller fruit conversation, but it also gives us a chance to think like better container gardeners. Start with growth habit and harvest purpose. Then add your local conditions. If the pot gets harsh afternoon sun, pay attention to how fast it dries. If nights stay cool early in the season, be realistic about transplant timing. If your area has recurring tomato disease problems, Do not treat cultivar choice as a replacement for sanitation, airflow, and careful watering. The name on a good variety list is only the beginning. Your patio still gets the final vote. And the next tomato gives us a middle ground between tiny cherries and the larger slicing fruit many gardeners picture when they hear the word tomato. Red Racer F1 is interesting because cocktail-size fruit changes the serving question without jumping all the way to a large slicer. There is useful space between a bowl of tiny cherry tomatoes and one big tomato cut into thick slices. For some gardeners, that middle size is exactly what gets used most often. This is where choosing by habit becomes more practical than choosing by excitement. Think about a normal week in your kitchen. Do you want fruit you can halve for salads? Something small enough for quick meals but larger than a tiny cherry? A container is a long-term commitment for the season, so the everyday uses matter more than the moment you choose the seed packet. Red Racer also gives us a natural transition into plant structure. Once fruit size changes, gardeners often assume the plant's support needs will be obvious later. That is how cages end up being installed after branches are already leaning in 3 directions. The better approach is to understand the growth habit early and place support while the plant is still easy to work around. You do not need to build a complicated system for every tomato. You do need to think ahead. A cage, stake, or trellis is easiest to install before you urgently need it. The next variety makes that lesson even clearer. Solano F1 brings the support decision to the front. When a tomato develops a bushy, fruit-carrying structure, the plant may look strong right up until branches begin carrying more weight and the center of the canopy becomes crowded. Waiting until then to decide how you will support it can turn a simple job into an awkward one. Imagine trying to lower a cage over a plant after the stems have already spread. Every branch becomes something you are afraid to bend. Leaves catch on the wires. Fruit clusters may be in the way. You end up pushing and lifting, hoping nothing snaps. A cage is easiest to install before you need it. Support is not only about preventing a branch from touching the ground. It can also help organize the plant, keep fruit easier to inspect, and improve airflow through a canopy that might otherwise become dense. That does not make disease impossible, and it does not mean a cage can fix poor spacing. It simply means the plant is easier to manage when its structure was part of the plan from the beginning. With Solano, I would think about the support at planting time, not after the plant starts asking for help. And that leads to another kind of tomato decision, one that has less to do with the patio and more to do with what happens after the harvest reaches the kitchen. Early resilience, F1, moves us into Roma and paste tomato territory. This is the moment to ask a very simple question. Do you want to snack on your tomatoes, or do you want to cook with them? That does not mean paste tomatoes cannot be eaten fresh, and it does not mean cherry tomatoes cannot go into a sauce. The point is to choose the fruit type that naturally matches the work you want the harvest to do. If your goal is cooking, sauce, or other kitchen uses where a paste-style tomato makes sense, dedicating a container to that purpose can be more satisfying than growing another variety, just because the fruit looked colorful at the store. There is also a planning benefit. Once you know the kitchen goal, you can make better decisions about how many containers deserve that crop. One paste tomato plant may be a useful experiment. Several containers may make more sense only if you know you will actually use the fruit. Limited patio space rewards honesty. Before asking which tomato produces the most exciting fruit, ask which tomato you will actually use. That single question can save you from filling the patio with crops you admire but rarely bring into a meal. And now we arrive at a tomato that helps break one of the easiest assumptions to make in a small space video. Container gardening does not always mean choosing the tiniest fruit or the tiniest plant. Better Bush Hybrid is useful because it introduces a different goal, a more manageable growth habit, while still pursuing a larger tomato experience. This is not permission to squeeze a large fruited tomato into a tiny decorative pot and hope for the best. Root room, stable moisture, good potting mix, support, and sunlight still matter, but it shows why smallest plant is too simple as a rule. By now, you may think the lesson is always to choose the smallest tomato available. It is not. A compact plant is valuable when compact growth solves your problem. If your patio is narrow, yes, a controlled habit matters. If you want cherry tomatoes, a compact cherry may be perfect. But what if you want a more substantial tomato for slicing? What if your container is large and well placed? What if you are willing to install stronger support? Suddenly, the smallest plant is not automatically the best fit. This is the middle of the story, and it is where the goal changes. We are not trying to fit the greatest number of plants onto a patio. We are trying to make every container useful to the gardener who owns it. Small is a feature, fit is the goal. That is why the next half of the list changes the conversation. Peppers can look tidier beside a tomato, but two pepper plants that occupy similar space may still give you completely different reasons to grow them. Before choosing the next container, ask one simple question: sweet, snackable, or hot? Before we move fully into peppers, take one more look at the tomato side of the patio. Notice how different those 9 choices already feel. A trailing plant changes where you place the pot. A compact cherry changes how much room you reserve. A paste tomato changes what you expect from the kitchen. A larger fruit plant changes how seriously you think about root room and support. That is why buying a tomato plant is not a complete decision. The crop name is only the first layer. The cultivar changes the plant you manage, and your own habits decide whether that plant feels useful or frustrating. This is also the moment to resist one more beginner impulse: collecting too many varieties simply because each one sounds interesting. 17 choices in a video do not mean you need 17 containers. If you have 3 good sunny spots, choose 3 plants with 3 clear jobs. One may be for snacking, one for cooking, and one may simply be the tomato you most enjoy eating fresh. A smaller garden becomes easier to manage when every pot has a purpose. And peppers make that purpose even easier to see. Pretty and Sweet F1 is a strong visual change after a long run of tomatoes. The fruit can move through multiple colors, and the plant's compact habit gives it appeal in a container setting where the garden is also part of the patio view. For many people, that matters. A small garden does not have to choose between useful and attractive. But color alone is not a reason to dedicate a pot to a pepper. Ask what you will do with the fruit. Will you add it fresh to meals? Pick peppers when they reach a color you like. Use the plant as an edible feature near a sitting area. These are practical questions because they determine whether the harvest becomes part of your routine. This is also a good time to stop comparing every pepper to a tomato. Peppers may often look more upright and contained, but tidy does not mean you can stop paying attention. Container moisture can still swing during hot weather. Branches carrying fruit still deserve inspection. Crowding several peppers into a small pot because the seedlings look narrow can still create competition below the soil. Pretty and Sweet earns its place when you want a compact, colorful sweet pepper experience. But the next plant is even more specific. It asks whether the fruit fits the way you snack. Sweetie Pie F1 brings us into the mini bell and snacking pepper idea. Small fruit can be useful because it changes the threshold between seeing a pepper on the plant and actually using it. A large bell pepper may be something you plan a meal around. A smaller snack pepper can be something you pick, rinse, slice, and use with very little thought. A useful harvest is the harvest you keep reaching for. That sentence may be more important than any promise about huge yields. A container garden is personal. One gardener may value a bowl of cherry tomatoes. Another wants paste tomatoes for cooking. Another wants peppers that can go straight into lunch. The best use of limited space depends on the person carrying the basket inside. Sweetie Pie also helps us compare fruit size and plant size without treating them as the same thing. A small pepper does not automatically mean the whole plant can be ignored. Give the roots room. Keep the drainage open. Check moisture rather than assuming. Watch the branches as fruit develops. If snack-size sweet peppers are the kind of harvest you will use, this category deserves attention. But sweet pepper still leaves a lot of decisions unanswered. The next variety changes the fruit shape and the way many gardeners imagine using it. Escamillo F1 is a sweet, tapered pepper, and that shape shifts the kitchen conversation again. Think about roasting, grilling, slicing, or cooking. If those are the ways you naturally use peppers, a tapered sweet pepper may deserve a container more than a bell pepper, chosen simply because bell pepper was the first category that came to mind. This is the danger of shopping by category alone. Tomato is too broad. Pepper is too broad. Even sweet pepper still leaves important decisions unanswered. Fruit shape, flavor, harvest purpose, plant habit, and your climate can all narrow the field. Escamillo is also another reminder that a compact growth habit can be valuable without becoming the whole story. The plant should fit the space, yes, but the fruit should fit your kitchen. When both line up, the container has a clear reason to be there. Before you buy a sweet pepper, imagine 3 meals you would actually make with it. That small mental test can be surprisingly useful. If you cannot think of one, you may be choosing the plant for the seed packet rather than for your life. The next sweet pepper gives us a different shape again and a useful contrast with the heavy support planning we discussed for tomatoes. Sweet Sunset F1 brings the banana pepper form into the container discussion. A compact, upright pepper can feel much simpler beside a tomato that wants a cage, a stake, or a tall trellis. That contrast is real, but it should not make us careless. Pepper branches can still carry meaningful fruit weight. Wind can still move a container plant. A crowded canopy can still make inspection harder. The lesson is not peppers need no support. The lesson is to match the support to the plant instead of automatically giving every crop the same structure. This is another reason I like to plan the entire container area before planting. Put the crops that need taller cages or trellises where those supports will not shade smaller containers unnecessarily. Give trailing plants an edge where they can spill safely. Keep upright peppers where they are easy to reach and inspect. The pots may be separate, but the garden still works as one space. If sweet peppers are your priority, choose by how you will use the fruit first, then compare the plant habit. Pretty N Sweet gives you a colorful, compact option. Sweetie Pie leans into snacking. Escamillo shifts toward a tapered cooking pepper. Sweet Sunset brings a banana pepper type into the mix. Now the flavor changes, because the remaining containers belong to gardeners who want heat. Potapeno F1 starts with something familiar. Jalapeño type peppers. Familiarity is useful because many gardeners already know how they want to use the fruit. Salsas, fresh slices, cooking, grilling. There is already a kitchen plan, but a familiar pepper name does not mean every cultivar gives you the same container experience. Potapeno is interesting because the compact plant was selected with containers and hanging baskets in mind. That makes it a good example of why cultivar names matter. Jalapeño tells you the general fruit type. The cultivar helps tell you more about the plant you will actually manage. This is exactly the same lesson we learned with tomatoes. Do not stop at the fruit category. Look one level deeper. If you want jalapeno type fruit and your first limitation is space, a compact cultivar makes more sense than choosing a plant blindly and hoping it behaves. Still, give it a real container with drainage. Do not confuse compact with tiny root system. Check moisture during hot weather. Harvest fruit with clean hands. And avoid touching your eyes after handling hot peppers. The next pepper changes the heat profile and the kitchen purpose. It is a good reminder that limited containers should be dedicated to heat you actually use. Quickfire F1 takes us toward a compact Thai-type hot pepper. This is where I want you to stop and think about your own cooking, instead of chasing the idea of a hotter garden. Do you use this kind of heat? Do you cook dishes where small hot peppers make sense? Will you preserve them using a safe, tested method if you harvest more than you can use fresh? Or are you choosing the plant because the fruit looks dramatic? Do not dedicate a pot to heat you never cook with. That may sound blunt, but it is the same decision filter we used for paste tomatoes and snack peppers. Container space is limited. The plant should earn its place by giving you a harvest that fits your life. Quickfire's compact habit makes it relevant to a small space list, but the real decision is culinary. A pepper can be productive and healthy and still feel like wasted space if no one in the house wants the fruit. On the other hand, a small hot pepper plant can be extremely useful to a gardener who regularly cooks with that flavor. And just when sweet and hot peppers seem easy to separate, the next choice blurs the line. Chili pie F1 is interesting because the fruit has a miniature bell-like appearance, while the flavor brings mild heat as the fruit matures. That makes it a category-blurring pepper. It does not sit as neatly in the mental boxes of sweet bell and hot chile. Those in-between plants can be useful in a container garden because they force a better question. Not, what category is this? But, would I use this? Imagine adding a mildly hot small pepper to meals where a full jalapeno-type flavor may not be what you want. Imagine harvesting fruit at a stage that suits your use, while understanding that the exact flavor and heat experience can vary. Now the plant has a reason to occupy the pot. Chili pie also keeps the compact growth theme alive, without making it repetitive. We have already seen compact yellow cherry tomatoes, trailing tomatoes, paste tomatoes, snack peppers, and jalapeno-type peppers. The point is not to collect small plants. The point is to use growth habit as one filter among several. Space, support, moisture, kitchen purpose, heat preference. Those filters are doing the real work. And the final pepper brings color progression, hot wax pepper character, and an urban container angle together in one last choice. Mexican Sunset F1 closes the variety list with a strong visual payoff. The fruit can show changing colors as it matures, creating a container that looks active even before harvest day. But do not make the common mistake of assuming color alone tells you exactly how hot a pepper will taste. Use the cultivar information, harvest with care, and treat hot pepper handling as something worth respecting. What makes Mexican Sunset relevant here is the combination of a compact plant habit and a distinct hot pepper purpose. It gives a gardener who wants heat another option beyond a jalapeno type or Thai type pepper. That is the real value of variety selection. We are not simply changing color, we are changing the reason for the container. 17 plants later, the question has changed. We started by asking, what fits in a pot? Now we can ask, which plant deserves the pot? That is a much better question, because it includes the garden and the gardener. It includes the size of the space, the support you are willing to install, the watering attention you can realistically give, and the food you want to bring into the kitchen. But one important warning remains. A good variety choice can still become a difficult plant if the container setup does not support the decision you made. The first thing to check is the container itself. A young transplant makes almost every pot look generous. 2 months later, the same pot may be the limiting part of the system. Plan for the mature plant, not the seedling in your hand. That means using a container with adequate root room for the crop and cultivar you selected, and making sure excess water can drain. A decorative container with no drainage hole is not improved by a perfect variety name. Roots still need a workable balance of moisture and air. I also avoid giving one universal pot size for every tomato and pepper, because the plants in this list do not all behave the same way. A compact pepper and a larger tomato do not ask the container to do the same job. Check the mature plant habit. Use reputable local guidance. And when you are uncertain, give a large fruiting vegetable more root room rather than trying to prove how small a pot can be. The label tells you the variety. It does not measure the patio for you. Look around the container too. Is there a wall directly behind it? Will a cage block a walkway? Will trailing stems hang where people brush past? Does a hot afternoon turn the corner into an oven? The physical location changes how manageable the plant feels. The second decision is support. Install tomato support early. A cage, stake, or trellis is not an emergency repair when it is planned from the beginning. Put it in while the plant is young and the stems are easy to guide. Use soft ties where needed, and do not pull branches tightly against a support. Peppers may need less dramatic structures, but inspect them as fruit develops. A branch carrying several fruits can still benefit from support, especially in windy locations. Match the support to the plant, instead of matching every plant to the same cage. The third decision is water. And this is where container gardeners can become exhausted by routines that were never adjusted to the plant or the weather. A thirsty-looking plant on a hot afternoon is information. It is not an instruction to flood the pot without checking. Put a finger into the potting mix or use another reliable moisture-checking habit. Learn how your containers dry. A dark plastic pot in intense sun may behave differently from a larger, lighter-colored container. A mature tomato with a full canopy may change the watering rhythm compared with the same plant 3 weeks earlier. Water thoroughly when the plant and potting mix need it, allowing excess water to drain. Then check again based on conditions rather than a rigid calendar. Mulch on the surface can help reduce evaporation, but do not pile material tightly against the stem. Consistent moisture matters because large swings can stress fruiting plants and contribute to problems. That does not mean you can control every weather event. It means the goal is a steady, observant routine. A thirsty afternoon is information. Do not respond with a schedule before you check the soil. The fourth decision is airflow and inspection. Do not crowd plants simply because the seedlings look small. Give leaves room. Water near the root zone when practical instead of routinely soaking the canopy. Keep supports organized. Look at the lower leaves. Remove badly diseased material according to appropriate local guidance. Keep tools clean and do not ignore a problem until half the plant is affected. The goal is not a perfect plant. The goal is to catch manageable problems while they are still manageable. So let's make 17 choices simple enough to remember. For the tightest tomato spaces, start by looking at Patio Choice Yellow, Lizano, and Toy Boy. They solve different space problems. Patio Choice Yellow gives you a compact yellow cherry direction. Lizano changes how the plant uses the edge of a container through trailing growth. Toy Boy keeps the conversation focused on a limited footprint. If cherry or grape-style snacking tomatoes are what you actually use, Fantastico, Gold Nugget, and Solano deserve comparison. Do not choose only by fruit color. Compare plant habit, local conditions, and the support each plant will need. If you want a cocktail-sized tomato that sits between tiny cherry fruit and a large slicer, Red Racer gives you another category to consider. If your kitchen goal is sauce or paste-type tomatoes, Early Resilience gives the container a very clear job. If you want a larger tomato experience from a more compact growth angle, Better Bush Hybrid is the reminder that container does not have to mean tiny fruit. For sweet peppers, Pretty End Sweet is the colorful, compact choice. Sweetie Pie makes sense for gardeners who actually use snack-size peppers. Escamillo shifts toward a tapered sweet pepper for cooking, roasting, or grilling. Sweet Sunset gives you a banana pepper direction and another upright container form. For familiar jalapeno-type heat in a compact plant, Potapeno is easy to understand. For a different hot pepper purpose, compare Quickfire, Chili Pie, and Mexican Sunset. Quickfire leans toward a Thai-type hot pepper use. Chili Pie blurs the line with small bell-like fruit and mild heat. Mexican Sunset gives you a compact hot wax pepper direction with a colorful visual progression. And if you still cannot choose, use 3 questions. How much space do I really have? What support and care am I honestly prepared to provide? What do I actually want to carry into the kitchen? Answer those 3 questions, and the seed rack becomes a lot less confusing. The seed packet shows you the fruit because the fruit is exciting. The fruit is colorful. It is easy to imagine a harvest bowl before you have even bought the pot. But the plant is what lives on your patio every day. You water the plant. You support the plant. You make room for the plant. You check the soil when the weather changes. You move around its branches. You notice the first yellow leaf and the first flower and the first fruit beginning to color. So before choosing the tomato or pepper you want to harvest, take one step back and choose the plant you are actually prepared to grow. Start with the space, then choose the plant. Look at the light. Look at the container. Look at the room around it. Decide what support you are willing to install. Then think about the kitchen. Do you want cherry tomatoes paste tomatoes, a larger slicer, snack peppers, sweet peppers for cooking, or heat you will genuinely use? A few pots can still give you a garden worth looking forward to when every plant has a reason to be there.